What happens when you manage $1.4 trillion? Part 1. The room where $1.4 trillion goes silent. At 6:17 in the morning, New York is still covered in a cold grey light. Down on the street, people pull their coats over their shoulders, stand in line for coffee, open their phones to check email, account balances, student loans, rent, and bills that are still waiting to be paid. And then you step into a room with no noise. A high floor in a financial tower. Dark carpet in the hallway. Cold white lights. A glass door closes behind you with the softest sound. In front of you are massive screens, chart lines moving non-stop, red and green numbers blinking like the heartbeat of a creature that never sleeps. At the center of the screen is one number, $1.4 trillion. No gold. No vaults. No suitcases full of cash. Only stocks, bonds, pension funds, real estate, government debt, airports, hospitals, technology companies, energy, data, and promises that will be paid sometime in the future. You set your coffee on the desk. You open the morning report. One flow of capital needs to be reallocated. One allocation has to be reduced. One market needs more exposure. Your finger touches the keyboard very lightly. But after that click, money begins to change direction. One industry gets more oxygen. One company is suddenly looked at by the market with colder eyes. A chief executive officer somewhere else walks into a meeting with the feeling that something has just changed. A small country may see its borrowing costs shift. You are no longer watching the market. You have entered the room where the market starts watching you. And the hidden truth appears very slowly. At this scale, a decision does not need to be loud to carry weight. At this scale, money does not move. It gives orders. Part 2. You think you are managing money. Before that room existed, you started at a much smaller desk. An open office. Blue light coming from the screen. Cold coffee beside the keyboard. You are a young analyst, assigned to read reports hundreds of pages long, reports most of the world would never want to touch. You learn how to look at a company through cash flow, debt, profit margins, labor costs, assets that can be sold, markets that can expand, factories that can be closed. At first, everything feels dry. But the more you read, the more you begin to see another language underneath the numbers. Outsiders look at a brand and see a product. You look at that same brand and see pricing power, cost of capital, legal risk, customer loyalty, and the ability to survive when interest rates rise. You begin to gain an edge. Not great power. Just the ability to see a few layers deeper than the average person. When other people ask, will this stock go up, you begin to ask, who is carrying the risk? Who is paying the price? Who is being squeezed so this profit can appear? Then a hidden truth reveals itself: the market is not built on fairness. It is built on information, speed, belief, and the ability to endure pain longer than other people. The price is that you lose your innocence. You no longer look at a business like a beautiful story in an advertisement. You see the department that can be cut, the employees who can be replaced, the city that can lose jobs, just so one line of profit looks cleaner next quarter. You thought you were learning how to manage money. In reality, you were learning how to remove emotion from the world. The day you learned how to read a balance sheet, you also learned how to see people as a line item. Part 3. You no longer choose stocks. You choose stories. A few years later, your room changes. The desk is bigger. The calls are more important. The people who once ignored your emails now start replying within minutes. You no longer just write reports. You manage a portfolio. Billions of dollars move through decisions with your name signed at the bottom of the page. At first, you think the job is to find good companies. But then you realize that is not enough. A good company can be ignored by the market for years. A company that has not yet made a profit can still soar if it owns the right story at the right moment. At this level, you do not just choose stocks. You choose belief. You sit in a conference room, watching slides projected onto a white wall. Artificial intelligence. clean energy, biopharmaceuticals, defense, data, supply chain restructuring. Every industry is selling a vision of the future. Your job is to decide which story is strong enough to attract capital and which one is only smoke. Your new benefit is influence. When you buy, people pay attention. When you sell, the market asks questions. One sentence in your report can force a company's leadership team to prepare an answer for the next shareholder meeting. But the hidden truth is colder. Value does not only come from the truth. It comes from what enough people agree to believe is true. You can be right about the fundamentals but wrong about the timing. You can see a bubble expanding, but if you leave too early, clients will not call you clear-headed. They will call you the person who missed the gains. The price is that you have to live inside crowd psychology while pretending you stand outside of it. In the market, truth can win. But the story always gets paid first. Part 4. You discover that real power lies in capital flows. Then the number you manage is no longer measured in just a few small billions. It becomes large enough that every movement leaves a trace. You walk into boardrooms where chief executive officers do not look at you like an ordinary investor. They look at you like a signal. A major shareholder. A source of oxygen. A risk that could appear in tomorrow's financial news. You do not need to say much. Sometimes, all you need to do is sit quietly at the end of the table, open your notebook, and ask one short question about profit margins, capital strategy, cost-cutting plans, or the direction of the next 3 years. The whole room understands that the question is not just curiosity. It is a reminder. You can influence how a company buys back shares, changes leadership, expands into a market, exits an industry, or commits to a new standard. No banners. No slogans. Just capital moving. And from here you understand a hidden rule: modern power does not always wear a suit in Parliament. It lives in asset allocation tables, credit ratings, risk standards, and decisions about which funds get bought and which funds get removed from the portfolio. This was never just money. What you are touching is no longer income. It is structure. But the price is that you are no longer allowed to pretend everything is completely neutral. Investing in energy, healthcare, housing, defense, surveillance technology, personal data, every decision carries ethical consequences. It is just that on paper, those consequences are written in a colder language: yield, risk, liquidity, capital efficiency. You realize that money does not need to have an opinion to create consequences. The law can say what a company is allowed to do. But capital flows decide whether it has enough oxygen to continue. Part 5. You become a guardian of the system. When the scale gets close to $1 trillion, you are no longer a single investor. You become one link in the framework of global finance. Your schedule no longer looks like a normal person's schedule. In the morning, a call with a major bank. At noon, a meeting with the leadership of a multinational corporation. In the afternoon, a risk report on interest rates, liquidity, government debt, and currency volatility. At night, when the city lights up, your screen is still glowing because another market on the other side of the world has just awakened. You begin to hear a crisis before the crowd calls it a crisis. An unusual spread in yields. A wave of withdrawals moving too quickly. A tense call from an institution that needs liquidity. A bank staying silent longer than usual. Your new benefit is being close to the center. Doors open. People answer. Reports arrive early. Conversations that never appear on television tell you where fear is moving. But the hidden truth is that the system was not designed to be fair. It was designed to keep existing. When everything is fine, people talk about free competition. When everything starts to break, every eye turns toward the organizations large enough to keep the wheels from flying off the axle. The price is that you are no longer allowed to think like an individual. A decision that is too forceful can create panic. Silence at the wrong moment can be interpreted as a dangerous signal. You have to balance profit, liquidity, confidence, politics, and fear. You no longer just ask, "What makes money?" You have to ask, what keeps the entire machine from collapsing? The higher you climb, the more you understand, the system does not need heroes. It needs people willing to keep the machine running. Part 6. When you manage $1 trillion. Then one day, that number is no longer a target. It becomes reality. $1 trillion. A number too large to imagine in cash. Larger than the economies of many countries. So large that you cannot move it without making the water around it ripple. You sit in front of the screen on a quiet morning. No background music. No victory moment. Only data, risk, capital flows, and decisions that are no longer allowed to be simple. At this scale, you do not hunt small opportunities. They are too small to hold you. You need massive currents, interest rates, aging populations, artificial intelligence, energy, supply chains, government debt, trade wars, infrastructure demand, and the consumer trends of hundreds of millions of people. You no longer ask, is this asset good? You ask, where will the world be forced to go over the next 10 years? Your benefit is access. Better data. Private calls. Doors opening before you knock. People do not leave you waiting in the hallway because the money you represent can change how they are valued. But the hidden truth is that you can no longer beat the market in the romantic sense. At this scale, you are part of the market. You are no longer a predator in the forest. You are the weather. And the price is that you lose the right to be free. You cannot act on a sudden impulse. You cannot disappear. You cannot move only because of a gut feeling. Every step can be analyzed, copied, doubted, and pushed against. Every decision is locked inside responsibility, regulation, expectations, and the fear of being wrong at a historic scale. You have power. But that power does not feel like freedom. It feels like a huge room with no windows. You do not own $1 trillion. It owns you. Part 7. The game is not money. It is position in the system. At this level, you begin to look back. On the first day, you wanted to be rich. Then you wanted to be right. Then you wanted to be respected. Then you wanted influence. But after all of it, you realize the most important thing is not owning the most money. It is standing where money is forced to pass through. Banks need capital. Governments need buyers for their bonds. Companies need major shareholders. Workers need pension funds to grow. Universities need assets that generate returns. Cities need infrastructure. Markets need confidence. And you stand between those needs like a massive power station where energy is redirected before it flows down into real life. Your final benefit is the map. You see layers of power stacked on top of each other: money, information, relationships, rules, liquidity, media, time. You understand that the people who appear on stage are not always the ones controlling the lights. The final hidden truth is that power does not need to be recognized in order to exist. Sometimes, the most influential person does not speak in front of a crowd. They sit in a quiet room, look at an asset allocation table, and decide how the future should be priced. But the price is that you cannot go back to not knowing. Once you have seen the structure inside, the old world is no longer innocent. The news is no longer just the news. Policy is no longer just policy. The market is no longer just numbers dancing across a screen. You have seen the strings behind the stage. Money is what ordinary people chase. Capital flows are what powerful people control. Part 8. Back to the beginner. In the end, the image returns to where everything began. A young person walks into a financial office early in the morning. The shirt is still crisp. The eyes are still bright. In one hand is the first coffee of the day. In front of them is a screen with red and green price lines, unread reports, and dreams that are still clean. That person thinks this is a game of intelligence. Of ambition. Of working harder, reading faster, calculating more accurately, climbing higher. That person wants to win. And you understand that feeling, because you were once that person. But now, after passing through the layers of the game, you know something the beginner cannot yet know: the more money passes through your hands, the less you are allowed to live as if it is only money. At the lower levels, money opens doors. At the higher levels, money builds walls. And at the level of $1 trillion, money turns you into part of an architecture that other people only see as a shadow. Outside the glass door, the city is still moving. People still buy coffee, catch trains, open laptops, try to earn a little more, save a little more, win a little more. And you stand high above, looking down, understanding that the game does not begin where they think it does. The beginner looks at the market and asks, "How do I win?" But you, after seeing $1 trillion at work, are left with a different question. Who designed this game?